They were sheep herders at the time. And she said you'd have to take the sheep and go sometimes a quarter of a mile around to get to another field. The sheep, cows, mostly sheep, would not go over a quarter-mile area at all for several years. And she said for the first 2 years, there wasn't a jackrabbit, there wasn't a tarantula, there weren't birds, nothing, not snakes, nothing would go over that land.
Whispers in the static, secrets leave a mark. Truth ain't in the daylight, it lives after dark. Ryan's on the trail, pulling threads apart. The Ryan Files after dark, this is where it starts. Angels on the skyline, demons in the mist. Giants in the earth, fists the size of cliffs. Nephilim footprints, history's abyss. Pyramids aligned, but who's making the list? Oh God, sleeping, Yahweh's thunder roars. Secrets in the scriptures, knocking on the doors. From Eden to the stars, the questions never pause. What's the cost of the truth? It's written in scars. Pages burning, lies unravel. Footsteps crunch where the ancients travel. Voices whisper where the echoes babble. Stay curious or let the shadows grab you. Whoa! The Ryan Files after dark, peeling back the veil, igniting the spark, searching through the cosmos. Truth leaves its mark. Stay curious. This is just a start.
Hello, amazing people, and welcome back to the Ryan Files. Tonight's episode isn't theory, it isn't rumor, it's boots on the ground investigation. For 26 years, Debbie Ziegelmeyer has worked with MUFON, not just reading reports, but interviewing witnesses, analyzing physical evidence, investigating cattle mutilations, crash sites, and even tracking activity over and under our oceans. The question isn't, are they real? The question is, how long have they been here? And what happens next? This is the Ryan Files. Let's dive in. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me this week on the Ryan Files. I'm very excited. Today we're joined by longtime MUFON investigator Debbie Ziegelmeyer, someone who hasn't just read about UFO cases. She's been in the field investigating them. Thank you so much for joining me, Debbie.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on. I think we're going to have fun. There's a lot going on,
Awesome.
Especially in Missouri.
Yeah, right. So I guess the question is, you said you've been doing this for 26 years. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
When did it kind of get real for you? When did you start, and when did it click and you're like, I'm in it to win it. This is what I want to do.
Well, maybe always had the curiosity. I grew up in southern Arizona at the foot of Mount Graham, which is where the Vatican has their telescope, whose nickname is Lucifer, which is kind of amusing. So I grew up with a brilliant sky. I mean, back then I grew up in Safford, Arizona. Now it's grown quite a bit, but when I was a kid, you could go outside and almost touch the stars, it seemed like. And I had a science teacher in fifth grade that was wonderful. On the weekends, he had a telescope, and we'd go to the football field and we'd stargaze.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I grew up with moon landings and NASA and Star Trek. So it's always been an interest, but I started going to MUFON meetings probably in 1996, and my first conference in 2000. And in 2000, that's when it hit me that I need to spend less time being a trekker and more time actually investigating what's out there, and that the people were serious about it. And at that conference, I believe it was Bud Hopkins and Bruce Maccabee and Stanton Friedman. So it was a very good conference here in St. Louis.
Very good.
And at that point, I thought, I want to do this. And then, of course, the X-Files had just come out too. And so, that made it even more appealing.
Yes, I want to believe. It's so funny that statement summed up so much. When you think about the zeitgeist, I guess, of the UFO community or whatever, that statement really sums up so much for so many people. I want to believe. And I think that to a degree, we will get to this. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I think we're getting into that moment in history and time where I want to believe is now more I can't help but believe, but we'll get into that. You
Right.
know,
And they were FBI agents too,
yeah.
Scully and Mulder.
And
And that was even more fun because you thought, okay, people don't take me serious, but this is serious. These are FBI agents. It's on TV, and so now you don't feel it's vindicated. I do feel vindicated. I did at the time to start doing this, and now even most more so with everything going on, right?
yeah,
The
yeah.
hearings and
It's kind of like the
yeah,
ultimate, like I told
yeah,
you.
yeah. Really, years and years. Like, okay, told you so.
Yeah, yeah. So what was the first case? You become a MUFON investigator and you have that first case. What was the first case like? And I mean, was it everything you thought, or I mean, I'm sure along the road you've had some that are just kind of disappointing, some that are like, oh my gosh, wow. But what was your first case like?
Well, I don't really remember the very first. I know the first big case because we investigate every sighting we get, and so the first one could have been Venus, which I know I did have one that was Venus, and it was a police officer had seen it, and
Wow.
we drove. We always go in pairs, and we drove way far south. That was like a couple 3 hours, and then had to tell this gentleman that he was looking at Venus. But the very first big case I had was it was 2006, and it was really kind of sad. It was a mom called and said that her 9-year-old daughter was having nightmares, that she thought she had seen aliens and a flying saucer, and they were coming back from Springfield, Missouri, headed to where they lived in Cape Girardeau. And the mom had gone to Springfield. The mom and dad and the little girl, she was having she had some kind of a medical condition, and the best doctors were there. So they were around West Plains. They were in the West Plains area coming back, and she remembered seeing all this fireworks going on right at Mark Twain Park, Mark Twain Forest. And there's all these fireworks, and she said it looked like it was a military exercises going on. Well, this was in the middle of a dry season. It was on a December 5th, and it had been very, very dry that year. And so it was a no fire zone. You weren't even allowed to take your four-wheelers because they were afraid of a spark.
Wow.
And she saw all this going on. And so to kind of make a long story short, after I talked to someone in the head of parks for Mark Twain Forest, and I talked to a police officer who had also seen the same thing. He was out of Mountain Grove, and saw these lights, off in the distance, and all these lights going on. And he said, well, it was before Christmas time. Several people witnessed this, but it ended up that the mom, after about 2 weeks, finally remembered her daughter had seen this bright light. She had, and the way that it ended up, that they had stopped. There were other vehicles there. Her daughter had been taken into a craft. They had taken the shoes. Both parents, they took their shoes, and she said, like, they think that we would have left our daughter. And when they brought the daughter back after about an hour, they gave them their shoes back.
Hmm.
And the little girl remembered a 7 foot tall alien that was solid black with these kaleidoscope eyes. And she remembers that was one that was more about 4 foot tall, that was gray. And that was the one protecting her. And the big one scared her. She remembered they were doing some kind of an exam, and they left her in the room alone. She took off running down the hallway and bumped into the taller alien.
Wow.
So, I mean, I was thinking, this is incredible. And I had a lot of witness to the lights going on, but the parents didn't remember until, a couple weeks later. And all of a sudden their memory started coming back about
Wow.
that. But the little girl remembered right off. And the sad part of the story is that it had an ending similar to Close Encounters, which is of the Third Kind, which is my favorite movie. They got divorced.
Hmm.
She became obsessed with UFOs. The little girl was traumatized and had to be pulled out of school. And the father said he couldn't take any of this anymore, and they got a divorce.
Wow.
So that's that's a pretty incredible base for everything after that. I base it on what I learned and what I experienced during that investigation, because that was just a little bit of everything.
Yeah, wow. That's an intense story. And whenever you're getting into like the aftermath of how it affects
Yeah,
relationships and whatnot, that's the thing that I don't think people, you know, take seriously or take into account is that there's an aftermath to all of this stuff where you have to live with whatever it
right.
was you saw, experienced, or whatever. And certainly, just seeing some lights in the sky is far different than an experience. You know.
Right. And then actually experiencing it and remembering it and the flashbacks and the nightmares, and the longer it took, the more it went on. I kept in touch with them for about 2 years. And then after that, I stopped calling because every time I'd call, the little girl would, she'd start having the nightmares again.
Oh wow.
And I just thought, I just can't do that to them. I just need her to try and move on.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was heartbreaking to me. I still wonder whatever happened to the little girl, because she was the same age as my granddaughter at the time, and it just kind of really bothered me. But
Yeah. Wow. What a auspicious start to your
yeah,
career, right? Yeah. So what is it about I mean, you mentioned like living in Arizona and different places. I'm sure that you've been around. What is it about Missouri though? It seems as if as much as anywhere else, and maybe to a degree even more, Missouri has kind of been a little bit of a hotbed for UFOs, UAP sightings over the years. And then there's a
well,
history of it too, all the way back to 1941, pre Roswell,
right.
you
Yeah,
know.
Cape Girardeau, with the nearest we could figure, was around April of 1941, and there was a crash. There were apparently three aliens. Um, Two were dead, one was alive, and then they shot it. This was brought up, I think, in oh gosh, it was one of the speakers. It was Ryan Woods talked about it, I believe, way back in 2001 at one of the MUFON Symposium conferences. But he had given some GPS readings. I went over there and looked, and it's not that far. Cape Girardeau's just exactly from where I am now, 90 miles south. Uh, but it hit a hillside. They had the fire department out there. They called Reverend Huffman from the Red Star Church that came down and gave last rites, because then after they thought about it, they had killed this being. But his daughter, for years, I mean, there was a picture. They took two Polaroid pictures. The one with the camera kept one, and they gave the Reverend the other picture, and it was two gentlemen that were holding this being up by its long arms, the one that they had shot. um, his daughter said that they had kept the picture in the Bible for years, and that it had disappeared, and so she didn't have the original picture anymore. I know that they had buried the aliens there at the old cemetery in Cape Girardeau, but people kept stealing the stone, and eventually the stone disappeared, and then they weren't sure. They had, I think it was History Channel, went out there with ground penetrating equipment trying to find out where this was, but nobody ever found anything. But
Yeah.
the interesting part was that was kind of the practice run for Roswell, and so they learned a lot from Cape Girardeau, and they knew exactly how to cover up and how the whole thing, and how to get in there, and how to crowd control and witness control.
Yeah.
And they
Yeah.
they learned most of it from Cape Girardeau.
Interesting. Were there, I mean, if this was, round number one, so to speak, there might not have been policies in place. Who knows if there's anything that happened prior to that that the government knew about? But let's just assume, for the sake of argument, that this was, ground zero. Um, did what was there any government officials that came beyond, just like the local police?
Well, right after that, they opened up an office, in an FBI office in Cape Girardeau.
Hmm.
And I did some history on it, trying to find, some research, trying to find out why. And they said, well, they were afraid, this was 1941, they were afraid that there were going to be Russian submarines that were mini subs that were going to come up the Mississippi River, and they wanted to stop them before they got to St. Louis. And so, that's 90 miles from me. So that's like 150 miles to St. Louis, maybe,
Yeah.
to downtown.
Yeah.
So I thought, why did they pick Cape Girardeau? It's so they used that as an excuse, and they opened up an FBI office there. So
No.
apparently they were involved.
Yeah. That's interesting, man. And you know, the thing about it is were there any, I guess maybe this is a question. Is there any mention anywhere in, like, did Ryan Wood talk about, you know, any showing up of men in black or anything like that? You know,
Um,
was there any, even just, you know, rumors or whatever of the bodies being exhumed by the government, any of that stuff? Because it just seems like that's something that just wouldn't go willy-nilly into the night, you know, and just remain there.
no, I don't remember if, no, he didn't, because I've never really heard of that where the government came in. I know that they were there in the cemetery forever, for years and years and years, and then they just disappeared. Yeah, you're right. The government probably came in eventually and just took the bodies because they can't even find them. History Channel couldn't find anything. The stone disappeared.
Hmm.
But it was so far, this is 1941. And then back then, if they were told to be quiet, that was
You were
we were in
quiet.
World War II. I'm sorry, we were in World War II, and so everybody was quiet. You had oh gosh, what was that? Loose lips sink ships,
Yeah.
and so that was what was being um, basically all over the radio. There wasn't TV yet, but they were telling everybody, be a patriot and don't say anything, and so there was a lot covered up.
Yeah.
And so I imagine even if they had come in and taken the bodies, I don't think anybody would have told.
Right. 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 Was this a, was it, there's, if I'm not mistaken, there's newspaper clippings of this, is there not?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. Fascinating. Um, wow. Huh. I wonder, you said he gave out the GPS coordinates
Yeah,
of,
he gave out these GPS coordinates, and so I drove down there, and it was a cornfield, and then right
yeah.
across the street was some kind of a quarry. And then I spoke to some other people and in the area. A lot of them didn't know anything, but then some of them said, well, it was this one hillside and they were building a subdivision there, and I actually tried to buy the property because it was just a field and it was already purchased and there were lots already being sold. And I mean, this is way after the fact, when I heard about it. And then I also had someone else who said that they had a shama that came out, a Native American shama, and that he said that it was about 8 miles outside of town is where it happened.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of there wasn't any one set place. I'm not really sure exactly if anybody knows exactly where it was, because that's three different places
Yeah.
where I have found that people have said this is where it happened.
I guarantee you, there's a one place where it happened, and there's probably a lot of misinformation about where it allegedly
Well,
happened, for
that's the
sure.
same as Roswell, because I've investigated well over 20 years. Roswell, I've been on three archaeology digs there, and I was a speaker there for a long time, for the festival. And that the same way too. You have the skip site, and then you have the Ragsdale site, and the Ragsdale site was where the gentleman was in the pickup truck and at the Boy Scout camp, and I've been up in there. And then they said, well, then that was fake. And then they have the corn site, and the corn site was another site where they supposedly had aliens and had craft. And at one point there were 5 or 6 different sites, and what was happening was it was just misinformation that the
Yeah.
government was trying to hide the primary site, and so they were starting rumors that there were sites in other places. And I think kind of the same thing. They
Right.
probably learned in Cape Girardeau that that you need to spread misinformation, and that's probably why they did that. And I
Yeah.
think the people that knew about it firsthand are long gone.
Right. Debbie, let me ask you about these crash sites too. I've heard from a number of people that these crash sites are so important because within the debris, there's all kinds of metamaterials, which are invaluable really to the, some of these companies like Lockheed Martin, Lockheed and,
Yeah.
all of these places that are reverse engineering stuff. But these metamaterials will end up, you know, some, just debris in the debris field. So it's important to protect that site because you might not get everything. But we certainly don't want, competitors or just random whoever going out there and messing with these materials, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So, well, in Roswell, we knew where the site was, and we worked with Don Schmidt,
Okay.
who is probably the smartest man that, as far as Roswell, the most knowledgeable person on the Roswell incident out there. He's got several books. And we were out there, my brother and I were out there in an archaeology dig in 2002. He tried to keep it really quiet where the site was, except that all the locals knew exactly. I later had a chance in, I think it was 2007, to speak to family members, some of the Brazel family, and one of let's see, it was his great granddaughter, Fawn Fritz, had said. I asked her. I said, "So how do you know exactly where the skip site was? Where this thing it came down, it hit a hillside, it skipped, and then it went about 19 miles, and then it dropped out 3 aliens from there, and that's what Mac Brazel had found on horseback." And she said that it's like when you first move into a house and you don't know the neighborhood, and you drive around a little bit, and the first couple of weeks you're in your new home. But she said if you've lived there for years and years and generations of people, she said that hillside, you know that windmill, that sinkhole. And she said you just drive along the dirt road, you didn't even think about it, you just drive over there. And she says we all knew where the skip site was. It was a sinkhole and a windmill. And they had the Heinz house, which unfortunately someone bought that property and just tore that down. That was another one of the landmarks. The windmill, it's long since lost all the paddles, but when we originally went out there in 2002, it had them. So she said, yeah, that's they know definitely that's where they would have to take they were sheep herders at the time. And she said you'd have to take the sheep and go sometimes a quarter of a mile around to get to another field. A lot of it's BLM property, Bureau of Land Management. So they just lease property from the government, and a lot of different ranchers use it. But the sheep, cows, mostly sheep, would not go over a quarter-mile area at all for several years.
Wow.
And she said for the first 2 years, there wasn't a jackrabbit, there wasn't a tarantula, there weren't birds, nothing, that snakes, nothing would go over that land.
Wow.
And you can't say, well, nothing would grow. Nothing grew much, pretty much anyway. It was all cactus out there. There's nothing but sand and like dusty dirt, I guess. Not really sand, but it might as well be. It's powdery.
Yeah. Interesting.
So yeah, it's it's a big area too. But there was that site, and then there's the Ragsdale site, and that's where, like I said, he had that there was someone in a pickup truck and they had seen something. We also had the other site, and I think that was real close, probably that one there where you had the archaeologist and his students saw bodies.
Right. Yeah. It's physical evidence is the key in all this.
Right.
If you can get physical evidence, that's massive. Have you ever?
We did. We found a little silver metallic in 2002. About that big, about the size of triangle shaped 50-cent piece maybe. And it's still at the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque, because anything you find on BLM property belongs to the government. Basically, it's BLM. It was analyzed and the tip was cut off, and that was by Bigelow Industries way back in maybe 2004, 3 or 4. The little piece was analyzed. And at first they came back and they said that there was an unknown polymer. And then we went, what? And then later on they go, no, we didn't say that, except that my brother and I kept the email. Later on they said, no, we didn't find anything. But it was just kind of, it was silver. They did a site analysis on it, and they said it looked like duct tape without the threads. That's like saying a boat is a car without wheels. I mean, it didn't make any sense. And so my brother got further analyzed and got it sent to Bigelow Industries, but it was just real flimsy, triangle shaped.
No,
and then with the heat, when we sifted it up, it curled from the heat.
Wow, interesting. Any was it heavy? Was it light? Was it like a metal, or was it like
it was real thin. It was thicker, more like like they had said, duct tape without the threads. But it was thinner than that, but it was thicker than a balloon, and like a piece of a balloon. It was almost kind of rubbery, but not. But it wasn't any of the memory metal. And it was just, that when you're out in the desert, sifting, and it's just dirt, dirt, dirt for days. And then all of a sudden I'm sifting and something shiny is there and the wind was blowing. And I hurried up and grabbed it. I went, whoa, this is what we're looking for, something that shouldn't be here. And it was in 10 centimeter dirt, which is like 4.5 inches deep, which would have been just about right for 1947.
Right.
So this wasn't something that was sitting on the surface that someone had thrown there. We had dug it up, and we had 3 people sifting, and I was the one sifting the deepest dirt.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
the moment I grabbed it, then the end started curling up, and then I put it right into a little sample envelope, and then it was a, I guess a professional archaeology dig. So we had people there, archaeologists there, that said, okay, they measured exactly where this was found, and then it was all marked. They had all the equipment that had measured out, and
Yeah.
so it's still around somewhere. Well,
Yeah.
at the
Allegedly, right?
university,
Yeah.
locked away.
Isn't it funny that the Bureau of Land Management comes in, takes the land, and then anything that you find there has to be um, returned to the government? Kind of
Right.
fascinating.
Except that we are the government. So, you know,
Yeah.
I know
Are
you can get
are
into that
are
whole
we?
thing too, but isn't it we the people? Isn't our land? Well, maybe not necessarily ours, but that's New Mexico land. But that's good in a way too, because at least you haven't got somebody that's going to come in there and just ravage, ground. They are trying to protect. And I think had they not, they have it. Otherwise, where would it be right now? Had it not been for them keeping it safe all these years. So
Yeah.
maybe it's a good thing in a way.
Yeah. Okay. Uh, any
I'm
other?
just trying to reason it out.
I get you. I get you. I understand. Any other, materials that you've been able to see, handle, or stories of people who have, got things? I mean, there's people who've talked about, you know, being, for what lack of a better word, abducted or whatever, and they've been able to take something back with them and all that. Any stories like that? Because I'm mesmerized by the physical evidence aspect of all this.
Well, we have here in Missouri, we have the MUFON lab. And so there's a lot that goes on in there, that things are mailed from all over the world and analyzed. But a lot of what it is, the most interesting is I've investigated 8 cow mutilations.
Wow.
And every one of them, and I can't even remember how many my brother has in Colorado investigated, but there's been 7 here in Missouri, and 1 was in Shelbyville, Illinois. And the dirt, what we do when we take dirt samples is you go about 25 foot away from where the cow is and take the sample. Then maybe you go about a quarter of a mile down the road. So when you pull in or pull out of this ranch, you take another sample of soil, and then you take something within a 10-foot circle within the circle of where the cow is. And in almost every single case, the soil is dehydrated. And I thought that was interesting. And this is in Colorado and in Missouri, and in different labs. That just there's, for whatever reason, the soil right within that circle is dehydrated.
Yeah.
Also, with crop circles, I know that the nobes, that they're, I'm not a crop circle expert, but that they're like, when they bend down, they're not just bent; they're kind of like exploded or something. There's at a molecular level, there's a change
All right.
in the fields from crop circles. So there is evidence out there that we've had. Mostly we get fingerprints, and that there were fingerprints that at the end of the fingerprints that were on a mirror, that someone that was taken, there were suction cups at the end of the fingerprints.
Wow.
So you
Wow.
don't get, I think the government comes in and grabs and everything. If you've seen Age of Disclosure, I thought it was interesting how that scientists said they've got it down to a science, that
Yeah.
they just go in and that they know they're tracking whatever it is coming in. And the moment it lands, they've got people ready to grab whatever it is and secure it. And
Yeah.
then then it's taken to a contractor, a
Yeah.
subcontractor, which their subcontractors aren't subject to what is that?
FOIA requests and
That-
all that.
right.
Yeah.
Well, they oh gosh, what do they call that? The Freedom of Information Act.
Yeah.
And so after 50 years, some of it's 25, 30, most the maximum I think is 50 years, they still don't have to disclose because they're not subject to that. So the moment that they get the evidence, they give it to a subcontractor, and then it's secured and it's nothing's documented physically. Maybe some of it on paper, but it's not documented within the government, and so it's not going to be ever to be disclosed
Right.
into the Information Act. I don't know. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, and if I recall on in the documentary Disclosure, they literally said like there are
Yeah,
teams ready to go all over the world that at the drop of a
yeah,
hat, boom, we go in, we get it, we get out, and
yeah,
it sounded like that other governments as well around the world have this,
yeah,
and it's like the big prize, man. It's the big
yeah.
prize to get.
That's how they keep the secret.
Yeah,
And then I thought it was interesting that Marco Rubio said, well, you have the people at the top are the ones that know all about the sighting, and they go in there and they get the information, they hand it to the subcontractor, and then maybe 3, 4 years down the line, that person's gone. There's another person there, and they don't even know that contractor's got that.
yeah.
That person is long gone. And so the people at the bottom are the ones with all the secrets, not the people at the top.
Yeah, it sounds like it'd
But
be what a get into the contractor business, I guess. Sounds like.
there you go. Yeah.
Wow. In addition to being with MUFON, you're a diver.
Yes.
And I wonder if just the being a diver, you have UFOs, you have USOs. I wonder if you have a special particular interest in those because of being a diver.
It's worse than that. I'm an instructor.
Okay.
So
Okay. I got
yeah,
you.
I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. I got the wrong line and figured out that I said, "What? I paid all that money to be a dive master," and then from there, I. But
Yeah.
that's probably what piqued my interest. I became a diver later in life, actually, the weekend after 9/11.
Wow.
And so, of course, the FBI pulled all of our files because it was 9/11 and people were they thought we were going to bomb bridges or something. I don't know, but it pulled a lot of the files for that. But I started looking underwater and getting more interested in how easy it is to hide something underwater and what a vast world it is underwater. We've only explored less than 70% of our oceans and our seas. It's just there's so much down there, and we can't even go really deep. When you have pressure, problems with pressure, tectonic plates. I mean, the deepest are tectonic plates. When you get the trenches, that's where the tectonic plates meet, is averages about 2.5 miles. And so pressure wise, it's if you're able to travel from one universe to another or interdimensionally, most certainly they've got the technology to go and hide down there. It's where you see a lot of the craft are coming in and out of the water. But I did have a chance, and I came so close. It was the 25th, let's see, January 25th of 2006. I went on my second cruise. We were all day long. When you go on a cruise and you go diving, they take you off of the ship. They take you diving, bring you back to the ship. You don't get to see the island you're on. It was St. Martin, so everybody else went inside, and they're changing for the 6:30 dinner because the ship left at 6 o'clock. Or by then they're already having the dinner. The other people, or the other half of the group, are changing for the 8:30 dinner. And I was outside taking pictures because they brought me back at 4 o'clock, and so I was already changed. So everybody's inside the ship. I'm out there taking pictures as we leave, and we got about 20 minutes from St. Martin headed to St. Thomas. And I looked over to the starboard side, the right hand side of the ship, and I thought, what is that? And it looked like saucer shaped craft. I only saw two. There ended up being three. There was one above I didn't see, but they were about the size of cars, and they were pivoting back and forth and kind of moving with the wind, and they were maybe only probably 10, 15 feet above the water.
Hmm.
And my first reaction was I looked behind me because I thought there was something from the ship reflecting onto the water. And when I turned back around, we were leaving them behind. So I got one really good picture. I got one through plexiglass, but the one good picture is not through plexiglass. It reset my camera settings. So instead of being January 25th, I think it ended up February 11th. From then on, my camera settings were set ahead. I tried to talk to the captain of the ship. The people that were around didn't see anything. They were all staff that were working. They were picking up towels and fixing chairs and everything, getting ready for the evening time. So I was the only one that saw it, but I do have a picture. And then I have a book out, The Alien Colonization of Earth's Waterway, and my story about what I saw, and the picture is in there of my
Okay.
one picture and how I saw it. And um, so I thought it was funny that I went diving all day in St. Martin, and then I saw eels and lots of fish and a few little sharks and a big barracuda. And then I get 20 minutes out, not even 20, not 20 miles, 20 minutes out to sea, and there's the UFOs hovering over the water. So you can be in the right place in the right time. But it wouldn't have been accessible. We were there was probably a couple thousand feet deep where I was, by when I saw them.
Right.
But
Interesting.
that's my one big experience with UFOs. I've seen a lot of unexplained lights things that I have on video.
Yeah. And,
In my
that's
investigation.
fascinating. Like the
Uh-huh.
ability to hide stuff underwater. Um,
Right.
and there's a lot of stories. I lived out in LA for a while in Santa Monica, and on a clear day, you look across and you can see Catalina Island, and there's all kinds of stories about, stuff in that area. Um,
Oh yeah.
you know,
I've been to Catalina Island several times. I was just there about, let's see, 2 years ago.
okay.
That's the last time I've been there. We went on one of the tours up to the top. You can take a bus tour that takes you all the way to the top of the mountain. And there, I was talking to people up there. There's stories about things that they've seen. I've got a whole presentation on. There was a 1992. They had over 200 reports of things that were coming out of the water right in and around Catalina Island,
Yeah.
and it was reported to the Coast Guard. They said, "Yeah, there wasn't anything there," but a lot of people saw. And then I even checked. I thought, okay, well, Malibu's only 45 miles would be, let's see, northeast, and they had the same sightings in Malibu,
Yeah.
but the Coast Guard didn't. They claimed that they didn't investigate it.
Yeah.
So
That's a
yeah, there's.
hotbed,
Oh,
right?
it seriously is. I've got a third book coming out that's just talking about people who were abducted and taken underwater, and
Wow.
that's it's at the editor right now. But one of them was well, there were a couple of them that were taken in that area, but one was taken and was abducted, taken underwater in that area, and then the aliens had told this woman that you can't find the base because it's covered with a camouflage some kind of electromagnetic camouflage net that covers it. And
Yeah.
then I had another abductee that had been taken from Gila, Florida, and then ended up in the Atlantic, and then ended up again in the Pacific, right around that area, the Malibu area, not Malibu, the Catalina area. So there's a lot of activity. Preston Dennett has a whole book about things that have come in and out of the water and the whole Catalina Island UFO experience. I think I've got maybe a dozen or so in my book, but he's got
Yep.
an entire book on them.
We've talked to Preston
Like he can
before.
get into more detail.
Yeah. We've talked to Preston before. He's
Oh,
awesome.
he's great.
Yeah. I think that the logic behind a submersible or a submerged base is, you know, not only logical, but I mean, it totally makes sense because, like you said, we have not explored much under the water, and our biggest problem is pressure. That's why we don't do it, or
Right.
can't do it. But apparently, these craft don't seem to have any problem going from space, atmosphere, water, transmedium craft, I think they're called. So I guess it wouldn't be a problem. As far as the the camouflage, the electromagnetic camouflage stuff, if I'm not mistaken, our military is already dealing playing around with that stuff,
Oh yeah,
for land
they've got a
vehicles.
base. Yeah, they got a base where they're doing experiments to camouflage their submarines. That's Alaska,
Yeah.
kind of above Ketchikan. But Carl Feit wrote a book about he was a water expert um, long before me, and I got to know him. He was a just wonderful man. Passed away a few years ago, but his theory was that they have an electromagnetic net electromagnetic field around them. And he said that's why these craft, that's why they can come in and out of our atmosphere without a sonic boom, why they can go at ease underneath the water. And he would say, we were talking one time, he says, well, they'll just adjust it to where maybe it's more like a peanut shape than a round shape. And that way they can travel at a high rate of speed underwater. And the craft never does touch the water at all. And so I said, do you think it has anything to do that maybe that they're going in and out of the water, not only hiding because of these bases or maybe transporting underwater, who knows what they're doing in there, but making their way around the earth by hiding underwater too, from point A to point C and, water in between. And I said, do you think they could be using our, H2O, hydrogen, and replenishing their fuel cells, because fuel cells were replenished by NASA using hydrogen, early on. And he said, well, it could be possible. So I had a chance to ask Lou Elizondo, and I said, okay, so Lou, what do you think, they're doing underwater? Why are they harvesting something? He goes, well, he said, you can't tell anybody, but he says, I believe they're harvesting hydrogen. And I said, yeah, I've already had a presentation on that. I've already come out in the public, but Lou Elizondo said, yeah, probably so. And then if you listen to Lou, he's talking about how that he believes that they could be coming in and out of wormholes underwater. You can open up a wormhole underwater and come in and out rather than wormholes in the sky that somebody's going to see. You do it very, very deep. And then also, too, he said they may be living under there. There's stories going back to the 1960s of 10-foot tall beings all in and around the Black Sea. Let's see all around the Anapa area, all around Russia. There's 10-foot tall beings underwater that have been seen for years. And, one of them was at 1,300 feet deep by a submarine. Divers saw them at 165 deep diving. And that's, the ones that tried to capture one of them, and they all but one of them died. It was seven, I guess the equivalent of our Navy SEALs that were training and came across 10-foot tall aliens underwater in silver suits. So if you listen to the Agent Disclosure or even some of the hearings, Lou Elizondo talks a whole lot about how they're hiding underwater, and they're probably living underwater, and they're not necessarily visitors, which I don't think. I think you might have visitors, but I think they're colonists. I think they've been around for a while.
Wow.
We're just now discovering them.
Isn't it interesting?
Maybe not so much by accident. Maybe they figure it's about time.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Because Lou, obviously he was the director of ATIP. This is a high level government official. Okay. And he talks all the time about, I went and saw him speak a year or two ago. And, there's a lot of the conspiracy theorists out there are all like, oh, he's just a government plant, disinformation, all that, maybe is whatever. But the bottom line is that he was definitely high up in the know about a lot of stuff. And for him to just, it's not like he's going around, Debbie, willy-nilly saying, well, yeah, these aliens exist. No, he's pretty emphatic about they're here. We know they're here. I mean, Marco Rubio talking about it. They're here.
Right.
It's and I'm just amazed that people will watch this program, and people like literally will watch this program that are friends or have known me or whatnot. And they'll be like, man, that Ryan is off his rocker, just because I'm just like, the evidence is becoming it's overwhelming almost at this point. The fact
have you read the reviews on that? I started reading the reviews on it. I mean, I bought it, and I'm going to be showing it at my next two MUFON meetings, half in February. Let's see, half in February, half in March, because it's almost 2 hours long.
Right.
But I started reading the reviews, and they're terrible. They're saying, oh, it's like a PowerPoint that's put out by a high school kid or a college kid. Or if you didn't already believe in UFOs, that would not be the thing that would convince you. Or, I mean, it's a bunch of gibberish. And I thought, did they even watch it? Because I've been doing this for 26 years. I thought it was incredible. The people that come out, the scientists that are coming out talking just openly, the government officials, the whistleblowers, the Congress people, what does it take to convince them, standing there holding hands with an alien? I mean,
Yeah,
it's there. People have been yelling for years about wanting disclosure. There it is. You've got
exactly.
three hearings, 23, 24. We just had one September 9th of 25.
Yeah.
And they're coming right out discussing this. Way back in the 70s, they had one. NATO had hearings way back in the 1970s for disclosure. And then somewhere along the way, everything got hushed up.
Well, the
But
Brookings report.
they come out with a documentary.
Yeah.
Some people, you just can't convince people. I don't know. I know the reviews are bad. That's probably put out by government people. People, maybe not so much government people. Those are the ones, the, what do they call that? That maybe the black forces,
Yeah.
sub
Black hats and
forces.
yeah.
Yeah. The one that still want to keep it covered up, which are probably the contractors,
Right. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It is. Imagine, Debbie. Let's get in our time machine here at the Ryan Files and go back to 1985 and release that documentary, and people would just be flipping out. But
Yeah, maybe
we
so.
we have a number of years of slowly feeding the narrative through media and movies and everything else, and now it comes out, and everybody's like, you know,
Yeah.
eh,
Well, Disney, they contacted Walt Disney, and a lot of what he was putting out was, cartoon characters and oh gosh, I forgot there was his little the space guy that, but I mean they had the studios basically coming out and making these movies, these B movies, and then finally, you get something like Close Encounters that comes out, and you've got Jalen Hynek that's working with Spielberg
yeah,
as a consultant, and they're using bits and pieces from actual cases.
yeah,
And then finally you're thinking, yeah, that's pretty, spot on for what's going on. And then I think what really did it was in 2017, these videos started coming out thanks to Jeremy Corbell. And he's got some great sources at these things. I think it was probably 2020, 3 years later, before the government finally said, yeah, that's, Go Fast and Fleur and Gimbal. Yeah, they were our videos. We are aware of that. But, they hid that. That was all the way November of 2004. David Fravor had
yeah,
taken that video, from the Nimitz in California, off California coast. Yeah, they
yeah,
hid it for that long. And I did some research. You can go back to the Bible, to my King James version of the Bible, and they describe a tic tac.
mm,
A flying roll that's 30 by 15 cubits. And so that, I mean, it's a tic tac back in
yeah,
biblical times. So they've been around for a long, long time. But now with all the videos, and I think we're in the middle of some kind of disclosure, and whether or not Lou Elizondo is still, I think, once you're with the government, you're kind of at that level, you kind of always are. But maybe that's what he's out there for. He's out there for partial disclosure. They started with releasing videos, and we've had them all the way from 2017 up to they just released the one. Actually, was by a congressman here in Missouri that released the one at that last hearing about the UFO, that they shot a missile from a drone at it and it
yeah,
just spun around.
bounced
Yeah,
off.
and so the government's releasing that now. They've had 3 hearings, 3 years in a row. They went ahead and spoke in the documentary. I think they're easing us into some kind of disclosure, and it's kind of exciting to think about, to what point, where is this going?
Yeah,
Because they're very, very, it was all hush hush, and now they're very, very open. To
yep,
what point?
yep. And it's there's a lot of people that the Brookings report said, hey, this is going to be like existential crisis if you
Yeah.
disclose. But I don't believe that it will. But that being said, it's going to change everything.
I don't know. I don't know if it really will or not. I mean, even the Pope a few years ago admitted,
Yeah, yeah,
that there was extraterrestrial life. I don't think so much, because the, the public is being more conditioned to it. And
sure.
then maybe it's the crowd I hang around with, but it's there's a lot out there, and there's a lot of parts. It's kind of a puzzle that I always said that everything that I find out, it's another piece of the puzzle. And then when you first put a puzzle together, you're like, I'm not sure what that picture is. And then the more pieces you start to figure out, and like, oh, that's the direction we're going in. This is what it's a city scene, or an ocean or something. But that's what's happening. We're giving little bitty pieces of the puzzle, and I think by the time that there's a major disclosure, I don't think you're always gonna have people that are freaked out, but the majority are people going, yeah, we always kind of knew that,
Yeah.
and unless it's something that's absolutely, like Independence Day, which I don't think so, but at least with that, where we brought the whole world together, to fight the aliens. But otherwise, I think if it's just that finally they come out and they say, here it is, and there they are, which they have.
Yeah.
I think the turning point would actually be seeing an alien, and we get to that point. They've shown us the craft. They've talked about, was Grush talked about, there's ships. There's a dozen ships. There's pilots.
Yeah.
Congresswoman, was that Luna, that said, what about pilots? Oh yeah, we've got entities. So they've talked about all of it. I think that's going to be the big turning point. We're all kind of eased in and aware, but at some point, there's going to be, an alien, and then you know what they're going to say, don't you?
What's
It's
that?
AI.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're going
Yeah.
to say it's AI.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, make you wonder why all of a sudden everybody's wanting to have AI out there, and they're spreading it. And then they have somebody on a commercial, a little gal in a commercial. I'm AI. You know, no one's going to believe it when an alien actually comes out and they say, "Here it is."
Yeah. I guess whenever I said it's going to change everything, I'm not talking about necessarily people freaking out or anything, but I think whenever you wrap your head around the knowledge that up until this point, we're the only game in town, we're the only game in the universe. We can speculate, with Fermi paradox and all this stuff, where it's like, well, we probably shouldn't be, statistically, we shouldn't be the only people out here, but the realization that we're not alone. I think it changes the paradigm, perhaps of a culture, perhaps of the world. Do conflicts, between nations possibly change, understanding that there's bigger things going on? I think that geopolitically it might have an impact that could maybe even be positive. But I think it will change perspectives, if
I
nothing
was going to
else.
say that perspective, it'll change,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But as far as things, you have catastrophes, you have big news, bad news, and it's all over the news, all over the media for about a week, and then it's all over with, and people just move on to their lives.
Yeah.
And I think the same thing will happen. They'll say, oh, here, now we've got, the UN. Now we're going to have the Federation of Planets or something that's going to come in with their representative at the UN, and everybody's going to go, whoa. And
Yeah.
then after about a week, they're not even going to notice this little gray sitting there. That's just, with a translator, like everybody else is. They have all these translators at the UN. There'll be a translator. I think we're just going to, it's just going to, we're going to accept it more. People
Yeah.
are a lot more acceptable. It probably make a lot of people mad that we've been lied to for so long, because they
Yeah.
can't really come out and say we've lied to you since the 40s.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I think they're releasing a lot.
Well, the
A lot
big
of it.
part of that is, like, if you've known since the 40s, I mean, I
Right.
think people can get over having a secret held over their head, but the abduction cases, and there's been physical harm, I guess, maybe, and cattle mutilations and all this stuff. Like,
Yeah.
you knew, and now, are what are we going to get paid for this? That's going to be like, some people are going to go down that rabbit hole. And that's why I think part of the reason why I think disclosure is so difficult, because to disclose it, you have to disclose the positive side and the ugly side.
Well, you know how they're going to get by that. When everybody talks about alien beings, it's not one race. There's a lot of races, and
Yeah.
they're
Oh,
trying
yeah.
now. Even they even said that, kind of hinted at this. It's big out there. There's planets that go on and on. Look at all the exoplanets. I remember
Yeah.
they first started looking at it. Everybody was excited. They were like five. Gosh, it's in the hundreds now. But what they'll do is they'll come out. One race will say, yeah, we're really sorry that there's animal mutilations, and we're really sorry there's abductions and all. That's not us.
It's not us. Yeah.
Yeah, that's not us. That's one of those other 8 or 10 or 15. There's some people say 50 some. I don't really believe that there's that many different races, because they say, well, there's different sizes of grays. Well, there's different size. If you just look at humans, we're in all sizes, shapes, and colors.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think a lot of the grays, that's what, because they assume they see one alien. If one looks different, it's a different race. And I just don't believe that. I don't think there's as many races as people think they are, but that's what they're going to do. They're going to have the one race that they released to the public. And they're
Yeah.
going to say, yeah, that never should have happened to you. And we're going to try and take care of that. And that's those over there. But, we're handling it. And
I can totally see it coming, Debbie. I think you're absolutely right. I think you're absolutely right. Couple rapid fire questions here for you.
oh,
Along this line. Um, okay, so I think we're both on the same page. Whatever this phenomenon is, it's real. And it's not just government craft or not just government. There's actual entities from somewhere. So my question to you is, Debbie, what is the origin of these creatures or beings or intelligences, whatever you want to call them? People talk about other planets. People talk about inside the earth, in caves or inner earth or in the sea, or they talk about, uh, interdimensional. What is the, in your opinion, where are these beings coming from?
well, Betty and Barney Hill, Betty Hill had a map that they had shown her, and come to find out that they had found out that they someone in the southern hemisphere, that those stars lined up. You couldn't see the northern hemisphere, and they couldn't believe that she actually drew that. But that was Zeta Reticuli. That was something that Stanton Friedman always focused on. Then I have witnesses that um, different aliens come from Orion's belt. I think the third star in the belt, someplace from that area. There's some that come from the area of Sirius. Then you also have those that believe, which I do to some extent, that they're us coming back from the future, coming back here. So that I know that there's people that claim that they have been taken and for years and taken into the future, and then put back to the moment that they were taken. That there's oh gosh, I've heard a lot of people now, they have a convention on it, where they are kidnapped as children, and they live 20 years someplace, and then they're brought back a couple minutes later, and some of them actually remember here, they're a child with adult memories.
Is that like
So
the 20 and back thing?
I probably, yeah,
Yeah.
they're working on different planets, and
Yeah.
they live out, remember this whole 20 years, and then they're just put back.
Yeah.
So then that's supposedly people from the future coming back and getting us as workers, and then taking us forward. So I'm not really sure. If I had to make a guess as to where some of these are coming from, I'd say Zeta Reticuli, and from Orion, from the constellation Orion. And those are the two most, I guess, talked about, that
Yeah.
people remember something, and then they say, well, I asked where you came from, and those are answers that abductees will give.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
some of them, but see, the ones that have the bases underwater too, I did some research on that, said for the next book. And there was, they talk about these people are taken in the 50s and the 60s. They're writing books about it. Now as children, they were taken, and the bases, they were building bases underwater in the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s. That's where a lot of the information, and because this is information that's being released basically from documents and people's memories from books from back then, and they're finally talking about it. Who knows what's going on now? They could be building stuff now, but a lot of information came out with the fall of the Soviet Union, and so there's a lot of information about Russia back in the 50s, the 60s, 70s,
Yeah.
and maybe into the 80s. But then you get into the late 80s, and we've got Russia.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Okay.
I think they came from somewhere, and they got cities underwater, and they're hiding them out.
Okay. The final question then, I guess, is
Okay.
if they're coming from, wherever, Orion's Belt or Epsilon Boötis or whatever,
Yeah.
why?
I know.
What do they want with Earth, humanity? What is special about this place that they're here?
That's I have a PowerPoint that I address that. There's different alien races, different reasons. People go on vacation to different places for different reasons. Some of them are researchers, some of them are explorers. So I would say pretty much the same thing. I would assume that maybe some are from the future trying to, I don't know, I don't know why people would come back from the future. But I would think some come as explorers,
Hmm.
because we're explorers. All of us, I mean, at one point or another, we go on vacation. That's a form of exploring. We want to see other things. We don't want to be in our own little realm. Some are scientists. Maybe their race is dying out. Maybe they're just scientists. Some are tourists. Oh my gosh, I think it was last year about this time, we had 3 or 4 different sightings in the Kansas City area, and they were all some kind of a long craft and with windows. And these people said they swore they could see people looking out, and they looked like human people looking out, and then they would just whoop and disappear. We had several sightings in the Kansas City area of this, and people remote viewing it, and they came out. The remote viewers came up with they said they thought that they were tourists coming from the future and coming back. And I thought, you got to be kidding me. That was the first I'd ever heard of that. But I would say the majority are probably explorers and scientists.
Okay. All right. This has been a fascinating conversation. I appreciate your depth of knowledge on it, for sure. You've written a number of books. You've got some more coming out. Tell people how they can get a hold of you, get your books, all of that.
Oh, okay. Well, you can email me at MUFON, MUFON, diver, DIVER, at gmail.com. And if you can't remember the email address, just go on the MUFON.com website and find a chapter and look up Missouri. And there's my email address right there. It used to be my phone number, but I was getting, yeah, you wouldn't believe some of the phone calls where they were coming from.
I'm sure.
And my books are available on Amazon. And right now I've got Alien Colonization of Earth's Waterways, and it's a reference book that tells you have to know what's ours underwater and around the bases before you could speculate on it being something else. And so I've got documents in there, and I've got sightings that go back, like I said, from biblical times forward. A whole chapter just on maritime, about 300 maritime sightings. And the second book is the 50th anniversary of the Southeast. Let's see, 50th anniversary of the Southeast Missouri Ozarks UFO flap, and that's talking a whole lot about how in the 1973, starting February 21st of 1973, you had Reggie Bone and the basketball team from Piedmont, which, by the way, Piedmont, the 22nd, 3rd, 4th, I believe, of April, they're having a festival again in Piedmont. That is now the designated UFO capital of the state of Missouri, is Piedmont. So you might want to go check out their UFO conference there. Okay. And then my third book is just about ready to come out. And I forgot what we're still working on the name. Okay. But it's going to focus on people that have been abducted and taken underwater.
Okay.
And so I've got about a dozen people that remember that they were actually taken underwater, because that's really the key. When if people remember being abducted sometimes, and sometimes they remember coming back, and during regression they'll remember what happened to them, but nobody remembers the trip there and
Yeah.
back. And if they do, then you know what the secret's out of where the base is located. So
Okay.
that third book will be out probably in like 2-3 months.
Awesome. And this has been a good conversation. I really enjoy your, like I said, the depth of knowledge, and just kind of, it's broad too. And I, a lot of this stuff, I believe is documented, but I think that there's, and rightfully so, probably going to be some speculation into, what all this means and everything. And that's just human nature to do that. And
Right.
so I appreciate you taking the time and coming on and just having a great talk. I could talk to you forever, because I'm sure we got opinions and thoughts about everything. So it's awesome. I appreciate you.
At this point, that's about all you can have. We've got a lot of, it's all hearsay, but I think if this went to court, I think we'd win the case that aliens exist. So
Yeah.
there are other races. So we've got enough to win the case in court.
There you go.
Well, not so much physical.
Come on.
I
Fill in the
enjoyed
blanks.
Juan.
Yeah. You're awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you
And
for having me.
If you ever need to promote anything, I will just shoot me an email and come on back on, because you're awesome. All right.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you. That was very kind. Thank you.
Awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Debbie Ziegelmeyer, thank you so much. What makes this conversation powerful isn't just the sightings, it's the patterns. Crash retrieval stories, soil anomalies, underwater activity, military interest, government hearings, and a 26-year investigator saying, this isn't going away. Whether they're interplanetary, interdimensional, underwater, or something else entirely, the phenomenon is persistent. And if disclosure continues, we may be closer than ever to the answers. If you want to go deeper, the aftermath continues on Patreon at patreon.com/The Ryan Files, where we unpack the questions we couldn't fit into this episode. Also, visit theryanfiles.com for everything awesome and curious. Episodes, updates, and more. And if you're on the go, you can always listen on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You folks are awesome. Thank you. Be amazing, be positive, and stay curious out there, my friends. I'll see you next time, right here on The Ryan Files.
Whispers in the static, secrets leave a mark. Truth ain't in the daylight, it lives after dark. Ryan's on the trail, pulling threads apart. The Ryan Files after dark, this is where it starts. Angels on the skyline, demons in the mist. Giants in the earth, fists the size of cliffs. Nephilim footprints, history's abyss.